My name is David Murphy. I joined the IU ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, when I started college in the fall of 1965 in Bloomington. In those days, there was a hot war in Vietnam and there was a Cold War everywhere else in the world. The Russians, the Soviets were on one side, all of their allies. The United States and its allies were on the other side. And in those days, most of us really believed there probably would be a second hot war between the United States and the Soviet Union. All of us were just praying that it wouldn't be a nuclear war. When you start in ROTC, you start as an enlisted person. You go to class usually 3 days a week as a freshman and as a sophomore. A junior and a senior is about the same, but you go out on field problems. You drill, in those days at least, a lot. In other words, close order drill, moving men back and forth in formation. And then at the end of the year, we had a parade. Now, when I was a junior in the spring of 1968, IU had the last ROTC parade until after the Vietnam War. Because things got so unsettled in Bloomington, they decided to cancel the parade, etc., in 1969 in the spring. We went from there to Fort Riley, Kansas for 6 weeks in the summer. You live out in the field, basically. As a combat infantryman, you learn lots of things. You learn how to navigate with a compass at night. You learn how to take a rifle apart in the dark in less than 30 seconds and put it back together again. You learn first aid. You take turns leading groups of your fellow soldiers. You march again. They do a lot of marching, a lot of rifle marksmanship. And for somebody with his eyes as bad as I had, that was really kind of funny. Harry Gonzo, who was the IU All-American football player, a year younger than I am, when we all went up for our physicals to get examined to see if we could be in the Army, they flunked him because his knees were bad. They passed me, stamp, combat qualified, and my eyes were so bad, when I'd shoot at 400-meter targets, I'd aim at the dirt in front of the target, hoping the bullet would bounce into it. It was fun, it was interesting, it was challenging, and working with the other guys, frankly, was a lot of fun. I belonged to a unit on the west side of Indianapolis called the 21st Theater Support Command, whose job it was, in the event of a war, to go to southern Germany and take over virtually all of the logistical support activities for everything from the English Channel to the inner German border. That was between the Russians and us. In other words, the headquarters that we were assigned to had that responsibility. If you drove it, if you wore it, if you fired it, if you got fixed by it, if you ate it, if you slept on or under it, we got it for you. All the logistics support that you can imagine, to include medical, to include engineer, to include ammo. That was our job. So for the most of my middle career, between about 1985 and then probably until the late 90s, that's what I did. Combat in the sense of being shelled by very big missiles called Scuds. They're actually rockets. They're like the size of a telephone pole or bigger, but they have no guidance system. They are aimed by the angle at which it is projected. They're very inaccurate. We did take one major hit toward the end of the Gulf War that was really quite by accident, that caused a lot of casualties in a unit that worked for us. Lots of good experiences, lots of good experiences being able to help with the war effort. When we got to Saudi Arabia, we had to go out and find everything that the other units were going to use, either facilities or stuff the Saudis could give us, locations, things like that. Lots of just real interest in getting ready to start that war. 24/7 constant activity. You learn how to sleep standing on your feet because you don't have time to go back and go to bed. Or you learn how to, catch a nap in a car while you're waiting for somebody to come out to deliver something. But one of the most memorable things I did, I think, was help with the redeployment of a unit of the 2nd Armored Division. The 2nd Armored Division was located at Fort Hood, Texas. In World War II, it was called Hell on Wheels. It was one of Patton's. They had a brigade, which is probably 25 to 3,500 men and probably 150 tanks, called the Tiger Brigade. And the reason they called it the Tiger Brigade was because it made mincemeat of German Tiger tanks during World War II. It got that nickname. Well, when they came back from the desert after they kicked the crap out of Saddam Hussein's army, we had to get them out of the country as quickly as we could because they had a real mission. So I approached my counterpart in the Saudi army and asked if we could use this one particular stretch of highway I knew about that was really quite isolated and yet close to the airport. He came back a little later and he said, "Why do you want this road?" And I said, "Well, because of where it is and how it's located." And he said, "It's right outside the home of the prince that controls the eastern province." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Well, the prince doesn't care, but some of our people think that it may look like the Americans are protecting him." And I said, "Well, keep your people away." He said, "All right, we'll do that." So we parked, like I said, 2,000 to 3,000 men and all these tanks on the roads down there, and our people came in and serviced them and cleaned them up and got them ready to go, and then got them out of the country in record time. I received the Bronze Star and a couple of other similar kinds of service medals, the Gulf War Medal, and my unit was selected for a Presidential Unit Citation, meaning the unit as a whole was honored by President Bush as an particularly outstanding unit. I was promoted after I came home. I was lieutenant colonel when the war started and when it ended. We used a real primitive version of email, very, very primitive in 1990. I also got to know where all the phones were on that base that were direct lines back to the U.S. So my friends and I would take turns going to these locations and calling home. We had a schedule, so we'd check in at various times. And of course, when we would call, it'd be 2 o'clock in the morning here. But that's better than not being able to call at all. Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I don't mean just this my unit. I mean, when we got ready to fight that war, in round numbers, we had probably 3/4 of all the tank ammunition in the Army. We had probably 80% of all the NBC chemical protective gear. We had stuff came out of storage we didn't know existed. I mean, things just showed up. That's the way it is. You have all the stuff put away, and when the balloon goes up, somebody knows where to go get it. Very good. This unit on the west side of Indianapolis was composed of people like me who were professionals in some way. We had engineers, we had cops, we had college professors, we had other lawyers, we had city planners, we had city bureaucrats, we had politicians, we had a whole collection of people who in civilian life did things that were very different than what the Army has as a whole. But we were all trained to do a particular thing, a particular military skill. So when we showed up, we brought the best of both worlds. So when we got to Saudi Arabia, my boss would say, "Go out and talk to Prince so-and-so and see if you can get the rights to use all that land down the port." And he'd give me this big map and say, "We need these lots." So I'd sit down with some planner, or I'd send one of my guys who, I had a bunch of guys working for me from Philadelphia, who were the city government basically from Philadelphia. And they'd go down there and have tea and, shoot the bull and have a great time with these guys and come back and say, "Here it is." It was very rewarding. It was a sense of being part of something much larger than yourself, organized and dedicated to doing a particularly important thing. Because all of us had grown up in the 50s and 60s watching what was going on all over the world and recognizing what a threat the Soviet Union was. And most of us had parents who had been in World War II. So we had some understanding of what could happen and how bad it could be. And all of us were dedicated that if anything like that ever got started, we were not going to lose this. No matter what it took, we were going to do the job right.